Hey guys, so I had a successful surgery a couple of days ago, but the doctor said I have to be off my feet for an entire week, so I'll be gone this week. Mrs. Gray will be your sub. I'll be leaving you little videos here and there just to introduce new things because we're doing a lot of new things starting this week. Starting with our first major writing project, which is literary analysis. So take out your notebooks and we're going to take some notes on this. And you can pause this at any time. Literary analysis. First, write down this first definition of analysis, which is a separation of a whole into its parts. So for analysis, you're looking at the different parts of a whole and how they relate to each other. You don't have to write down the second and third definitions. And you can analyze anything from a car to a volleyball game to whatever. And we're analyzing, of course, literature. So literary analysis, the main idea here is we're going beyond the plot. We're not just reading these books and stories for the plot, but we're looking at themes and the different parts of the stories or books. So there's 8 questions we're going to focus on, and I want you to write these down. Pause if you need to. Number 1, what's the historical context of the story? In other words, what's happening in history when the story was written? Number 2, what are the big ideas the author seems to focus on? Things like themes and big questions about life. Number 3, what are the conflicts? And those can be internal inside a character or external. And this is a really key question. Number 4, how are those conflicts resolved? And of course, we can't answer this till we finish the story. Number 5, what choices does the author make with literary conventions like language and dialogue? This is the details of how an author writes this question. Number 6, do you see any patterns that look familiar? This is a big picture thing, and we'll talk about this more later, but patterns that you notice over and over again in stories. Number 7, does anything seem symbolic? And most of the stories we read, symbolism really matters. And then lastly, and this is more of a personal one, does anything about the story, a character, a plot point, a theme, remind you of anything you've read before? So let's just do an example of these, of Mice and Men, a story that you've read. You don't have to write down these notes, but I just want to go through an example. Historical context of the story. It really matters that you know that this story is set in Northern California. It's the migrant community. These are people who, that's during the Great Depression, these are people who don't have families or homes, and that's important because of their relationship with each other. What does the author seem to focus on? Well, I would say he focuses a lot on friendships. He focuses on the idea of what it means to be an outsider in this world. Who survives and who thrives in this environment. Those are some of the themes. What are the conflicts? There's a lot of conflicts. George and Lenny's conflict with Curly, the boss's son. George has a lot of internal conflict about what to do with Lenny. And then each outsider, whether it's Crooks or Candy or Curly's wife, their conflict with the main group. How were those resolved? Well, those are all resolved differently. And we could go on and on about that. What choices does the author make with literary conventions? A lot you can say about this as well, but very simple prose. His writing style is very simple. He uses dialect a lot, sets up the book into acts like a play. So each chapter is like a different act with a different setting. Next one, do you see any patterns that look familiar? And the patterns that I see are, and you see these a lot in books, the main characters come into a new setting and try to adapt, sometimes with good, sometimes with bad consequences. Characters have to make hard choices in the midst of new circumstances. Does anything seem symbolic? There's a lot of symbolism here. Candy's dog that they eventually have to put down even though it's loved. The setting at the beginning and the end, and the clearing is kind of like the Garden of Eden. The mouse is a symbol of these innocent, beautiful but innocent things. Does a character or plot point or theme or whatever remind you of anything you've read before? And for me, this book, just the setting reminds me of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's set kind of in the South in the Great Depression. It also reminds me of Huckleberry Finn, if anyone's read that, a mismatched friendship, The Outside. So the first story we're going to be reading is a really short story. It's only 2 pages long. It's written by a woman named Kate Chopin. Kate Chopin wrote in the early 1900s. This was during a time called the women's suffrage movement, when women were gaining the right to vote and gaining more and more of a voice in politics and society. The reason we're starting with this story is it's short, and there's a lot of this stuff, those 8 questions that we just talked about, that you'll be able to find in the story. It's a good one to analyze for a starting story. So read it once. Tomorrow we'll work with a partner and dig into it more and see what you can find there. All right.